Christmas, and I don't know if you've noticed, but it's kind of my thing. Books, movies, home decor. If it's spooky, it's for me. It doesn't matter if it's good horror, bad horror, mediocre horror. Sometimes bad horror can be even better than good horror. I'm looking at you, Troll 2.
They're eating her! And then they're going to eat me! Oh my god!
The point is, I love horror, but even for a die-hard Stephen King aficionado like me, there's only so much Stephen King I can read, and this is definitely the season where all I want to do is curl up in a Snuggie and watch horror movies or read some new horror authors that I've never heard of. So I came up with this list of underappreciated horror authors for people like me who just want to add things to their never-ending TBR lists so they can curl up with a good book in some spooky weather and scare the stuff out of themselves. I absolutely love Grady Hendrix, Joe Hill, and Riley Sager, but I'm not going to talk about them in this video. If you like Stephen King, you should absolutely read Grady Hendrix and Joe Hill, not just because Joe Hill is Stephen King's son and is basically his clone in more ways than one, but because they are such great horror authors. But I also feel like having multiple film and TV adaptations probably makes them too mainstream to be considered underrated. But if you're in the mood for a great book, not so much a great movie, definitely check out My Best Friend's Exorcism and The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I would also really recommend Nosferatu by Joe Hill. These are spectacular books that I am definitely going to read again and again whenever spooky season rolls around, and I would love to have people to talk to about them. I also really enjoy Riley Sager, but I kind of struggle to put him on this list both because his books are so popular and because I don't know if they're really horrors or if they're more mysteries with a horror bent to them. You'll see if you read one. But that said, I can without reservation recommend definitely Lock Every Door and several of his other books. So definitely check out Riley Sager if you're more of a mystery fan who maybe wants to dip their toes into horror a little bit. Okay, so those are 3 bonus recommendations, but now we can get on to the list of authors you may or may not have heard of. This first one kind of worked its way through the Cromaine staff, much like a viral infection. It has traumatized half of us at this point, and everyone I know who has read this book in our staff has been like, that was great, I never want to read it again, please don't make me do. I was introduced to this book by our former community relations manager, Pam, who told me to read it, and I believe she told Shelby to read it, so all 3 of us read it, and then we told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and it just became this kind of like self-propelled monstrosity working its way through the staff, much like the things that Nick Cutter writes about. Basically, viral infections, or infections of some kind, run amok and creating havoc. The book we all read was The Troop, which is about a group of Boy Scouts camping on a remote island. A stranger approaches their cabin. He's definitely very sick. They're not sure exactly what's going on with him. And then his sudden death kicks off this chain of events that just spirals completely out of control. Unable to communicate with anyone off the island, the group structure dissipates very rapidly. The boys have to fight to survive against an enemy that they might not see until it's too late for them. This is basically Lord of the Flies meets the Andromeda Strain by Michael Crichton. I will warn you that there is graphic depictions of, I wouldn't say violence, but just kind of body horror involving teenage children. It is really disturbing, but the story is so good. But if groups of teens and tweens and or body horror and gore are kind of triggers for you, this is probably not the book that I would recommend to you, so stay away if those things are going to get you nauseous. But if you're a weirdo like me, this is a great book to listen to while you're walking around the wilderness alone by yourself, just looking at all the creepy crawlies and wondering which one of them might be looking back at you. That said, the descriptions of body horror that Nick Cutter writes into this book are so real. I don't know that I've ever smelled a book before, but I can definitely smell and still see some of the images of the things Nick Cutter described in this book, and definitely check out Nick Cutter's The Truth. One of his other books, The Deep, is about an infection that kind of sweeps through humanity, and the treatment for that infection, which might end up being worse than the infection itself. I'm only about halfway through this book. It is available on Hoopla. Actually, both audiobooks are available on Hoopla, and they are available through TLN as well as his other books. I think he has 4 or 5 out there now. Definitely take a look at Nick Cutter if you like horror, especially horror that involves potentially post-apocalyptic diseases and parasites. Adam Caesar is an author whose name I've been mispronouncing for years, but I think it's okay because I've also loved his books for years. His writing is definitely an homage to those 80s slasher/B movies that were really popular in the 80s. So if you're like me and that's definitely your kind of movie, if you grew up watching like Friday the 13th and Halloween, his books are for you. He's only got 3 books under his belt so far, but I would definitely start with Clown in a Cornfield because that's the one I started with. Clown in a Cornfield follows Quinn, who's a new girl in town. She moved from Philadelphia to this small town in Missouri surrounded by cornfields. There used to be a factory in the town, and there's this creepy mural of a clown right outside her window. This clown is named Friendo, and he was the mascot for the company that has since closed down. She falls in with a group of fellow seniors, and she gets invited to a party in a cornfield because, of course, where else are you going to party in the middle of Missouri? That's when the real fun of this book starts, as an army of friendos, this clown, starts hunting the teenage kids through this corn. It's the story of Quinn and her friends and their will to survive against these clowns that are just hunting them and brutally murdering her and her classmates. It's a really great turn at that final girl trope, as Quinn kind of has to make this choice whether to fight or, to give in to these clowns and die. And she definitely fights. This book shares a major vibe, like I said, with Friday the 13th and Halloween, but maybe even also the Scream movies, or without all the political stuff in The Purge. It's very much that kind of person just being hunted, constantly on the run. There's lots of twists and turns. It is an action-packed, cinematically written book. There's a sequel as well, Clown in a Cornfield 2, so if you like the first one, you can definitely move on to the second one and see how Friendo lives. Those are available on Hoopla, and we have the first Clown in a Cornfield in our tween section at Cromaine. By the way, these are in the tween section, but don't let that fool you. There is still a lot of action. There's a lot of mature themes in these books. It's not just like a Harry Potter. He has another book called Video Night, which was written for adults and is in the adult fiction section, not at Cromaine, but it's available through TLN. I haven't read it yet, but spoiler alert, it's sitting right next to my bed, and I'm going to start it probably right after I finish editing this video. So definitely check out Adam Caesar. Camilla Sten is a young horror author who writes horror novels set in Sweden, as one would expect. Her writing really sets up a bleak, creepy atmosphere, which is just a joy to immerse yourself in, if you're into bleak, creepy atmospheres like me. I did struggle over whether to include her in this list, because much like Riley Sager, I'm not sure if her novels are really horror or if they're more like crime thrillers with a tinge of horror in them, but I loved her book, The Lost Village, so much that I said, why not? This is my video, I can put whoever I want in it. The Lost Village is about a Swedish documentary crew going to explore a village that disappeared basically without a trace in 1959, shortly after something mysterious was found in the mines. The only things that were found when the village was eventually discovered to be abandoned were a woman who was stoned to death and left to hang in the middle of the town square, and a newborn baby which did live that they found inside the schoolhouse. Otherwise, poof, everything was gone. The timeline flips back and forth between 1959 and what was going on in the town at that time, and the current day as the film crew is wandering around the town and having some truly creepy sights and sounds that they witness that they can't quite explain. It's a really gripping book with just enough horror in it for me to keep it in this list. Major Blair Witch vibes. We have her book, The Lost Village, right here on the shelves at Cromaine, next to her other book, The Resting Place, which I haven't read yet, but you can bet is definitely going to be on my October TBR list. Definitely check out Camilla Sten. Her books are in the library, like I just said, and her audiobooks are available on Hoopla right now, so definitely check her out. She's great. Last on the list, we have Hometown Boy Grown Up and Done Good, as Josh Mallerman is coming to us straight from Southfield, Michigan. Mallerman might be a little too popular to be on this list of underappreciated authors, but I don't know, I don't often hear a lot of people talk about him or ask for his books, even though he wrote the book Bird Box, which the runaway Netflix hit was based on. I'll admit that Mallerman might be a little bit hit or miss to me, but when he hits it out of the park. I just finished Daphne a few months ago. It's basically like a Bloody Mary or The Ring thing where this girls' basketball team has summoned this creature. They are just slowly being stalked one by one. But the book I really want to talk about is Goblin. Goblin is a collection of 6 novellas, so basically stories that are too long to be called a short story, but not long enough to be novels in their own right, set in the town of Goblin, Michigan, which I'm assuming is a fictional town, but you never know with Michigan. You guys have weird towns here. I don't know what's going on. And much like Lake Orion, if Goblin, Michigan does exist, it's probably pronounced Goblin or something nonsensical. I don't know. I love Michigan. You're my state now, but some of your pronunciations are just weird to me. Goblin is a creepy little town with its own origin story, which I won't spoil, but obviously it involves indigenous people getting ripped off and conned by some unscrupulous settlers that may or may not have contributed to the creepy goings-on in the town. Each one of these 6 stories is almost like a Twilight Zone-y, definitely creepy vibe, lots of twists and turns. Goblin has, of course, all of the horror classics. There's a creepy stretch of woods, a hedge maze. There are these owls that are just terrifying flying around town, in the woods especially. It's a town full of urban legends that may or may not turn out to be actual urban legends, or, they could be real things. Who knows? I really wish Goblin would be adapted into an episodic TV show. It would be the perfect kind of like Tales from the Crypt creep show kind of show, where each episode could just be one of these stories, and it's the kind of world that I feel like could live and breathe on its own as just this unique little town where everything goes wrong. If you have read a lot of Stephen King, Josh Mallerman's Goblin is basically like his version of Derry, and I am just in love with it. Goblin is just a phenomenal question of sometimes scary but always odd, and oddly charming stories that I just couldn't get enough of. It's available through TLN, and the audiobook is available in Libby. I also want to give a special shout out to Jason Rekulak, but I couldn't really include him as a main topic of this list because he only has 2 books and they are wildly different. His first book, The Impossible Fortress, is a coming-of-age comedy book. I haven't read it myself, but I heard it's really funny, and the premise, I don't want to get into it, but is just such like a teenage 80s movie style premise. The book I did read for this video is Hidden Pictures. Hidden Pictures is about a recovering addict, this 20-something girl who was hired as a full-time live-in nanny for a child in New Jersey, so obviously that is very near and dear to my heart as well as an East Coaster myself. But this is a creepy kid who has full-blown conversations with a Eastern European woman who may or may not have been a murder victim who previously lived on the property. He draws these increasingly creepy pictures, and there's just a whole twisty story about what's really going on here. It is terrifying. Definitely throw that in as another bonus recommendation. Speaking of honorable mentions, I reached out to a few of my librarian friends at Cromaine. Here are a couple of the authors that I didn't get to check out for myself, but you can bet that they are on my shortly to be read list. And I thought maybe I'd include them because maybe you guys want to know about these recommendations, so here are lists from Grace and Heather. Youth Services Librarian Heather was kind enough to give me this list of books. She not only turned me on to Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Caesar, she also recommends The Corpse Queen by Heather M. Herman. What does grave robbing, body snatching, and high society have in common? Read this eerie, atmospheric, gory book to find out. White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. If you haven't read anything by Tiffany D. Jackson yet and you like horror or suspense, you absolutely have to check her out. White Smoke evokes a House on Haunted Hill vibe that will definitely leave you thinking about the plot long after you close the book. The Forgotten Girl by India Hill Brown. This spooky little ghost story is perfect for middle grade readers who love a scary read combined with history. This one will hook you right away and will leave you wanting more when you finish the book. Hide and Seeker by Daka Herman. The classic game of hide and seek goes horribly wrong in this middle grade book, perfect for Stranger Things fans, so you know I'm going to add it to my list right away. Adult Services Manager Grace also recommends books by Rachel Harrison, Jennifer McMahon, Matt and Harrison Query, Alma Katsu, and Paul Tremblay. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Cromaine's Desert Island Favorites. I hope you found at least one or two things that'll make you want to curl up with a good book in that stormy October weather to come. Maybe get yourself just a little bit creeped out. Give the library a call or feel free to send me an email personally at enilson@cromaine.org, and I would love to place holds for you on any of these items. Until next time, stay spooky, Hartland.